The Welsh Government has decided to impose a 16-day lockdown in every part of Wales to regain control of the pandemic. The First Minister, Labour's Mark Drakeford, said that without this action, the NHS in Wales would probably not be able to cope in the weeks and months ahead. But there's been dismay and some anger in those parts of Wales where the number of cases is still relatively low. Well, the lockdown there will start at 6 p.m. on Friday evening, and people will be told to stay at home unless they're key workers or can't work from home. Pubs, restaurants, hotels, all non-essential shops will close. Now, primary schools will reopen after half-term, but only years 7 and 8 in secondary schools will be able to go back. All other pupils will be learning from home. Exercising outdoors will be permitted. Parks will stay open, as will childcare facilities, and takeaway food services will be allowed. Gatherings indoors and outdoors with people not in the same household will not be allowed. But adults who are living alone will be able to mix in their support bubble. Let's start with our Wales correspondent Hywel Griffith, who has the latest for us.
Stay at home. 3 words that brought life to a standstill in spring, now an instruction for Wales in autumn. This cafe bar in Cardiff will close. The government says people must be confined to their houses again for a fortnight to stop the virus spreading.
A fire break period is our best chance of regaining control of the virus and avoiding a much longer and much more damaging national lockdown. The window we have within which to act is only a small one.
Many had anticipated the news, but it's split opinion. Dewi and Núria are divided.
Well, what concerns me is that it's blown out of all proportion, is that it doesn't seem to make a blind bit of difference of these lockdowns.
It has to be done, because I've been looking at the numbers closely and they have gone up really quickly.
Leisure, hospitality and tourism businesses will close.
Elliot's the manager here. He's frustrated that in summer the government was encouraging people to go out. Now it's shutting them in again.
We've had many more customers than we would have expected through August coming in a time where a virus is spreading, and I think it's irresponsible on the part of the government, and it's led to this. Now we have to suffer after we followed the rules.
Across Wales, Halloween is cancelled, bonfire night too. But while coronavirus case numbers are high here in Cardiff, over in Pembrokeshire there are far fewer signs of a second wave and questions over why here too they must shut down.
I don't think it's fair that we're being locked down with the rest of Wales, and we have very low numbers. We've all been very careful in these small rural communities, and we've just done everything as carefully and safely as we can.
The Welsh Government warns it must act to stop hospitals from being overwhelmed. Last week, the number of COVID-related patients rose by 50%. This new intensive care unit will open in the lockdown. They desperately want to avoid cancelling elective care.
Kind of preparing for the worst, you know, we've dusted back off our surge plans, we've got all the spare ventilators back out the cupboard, but I think it's with a heavy heart, and we kind of think we can't. Last time we turned the whole hospital off pretty much. Every spare member of staff was brought to ITU and retrained. Well, they're busy now, they're busy in theatres doing operations. We don't have that luxury again.
Businesses will need a lifeline too. This brewery has 160 pubs, but they didn't all survive the first lockdown.
A lot of beer has just gone down the drain. You know, tragically, about 100 people have lost their jobs.
Now the boss is worried this short, sharp shutdown may be followed by several more.
This is like sharpening a pencil. If you keep sharpening the pencil, in the end, there's nothing left. You know, you can't just keep chipping away at an industry, knocking it down, expecting it to get back up again in great shape. You know, every time we lose turnover, we lay off people, we have to close pubs, sell pubs, the business gets smaller and weaker. And that will be not just us, it will be affecting everybody in this sector.
A firebreak can only slow, not extinguish the danger. Lives and livelihoods depend on its success.
We'll talk to Hywel again in a moment. Just to recap, the new lockdown measures will come into force across Wales on Friday evening at 6 o'clock. And if we compare infection rates in Wales with the other home nations, the figures for last week look like this. They show that Northern Ireland was in fact the worst affected, with 385 cases per 100,000 people, followed by England and Scotland, and then Wales with the lowest rate. So with those figures in mind, let's go back to Cardiff and talk to Hywel. Given that Wales is number 4 on that list, Hywel, what is the Welsh Government's logic and rationale for this action that they're now taking?
Well, they would argue that that is actually a symptom of their success, or at least an indicator that their very, very cautious approach is slowing things down slightly more within Wales. You remember back in the summer, bars and pubs and restaurants opened much later here than across the border in England. Likewise, shops were slower to open. Travel restrictions were in place for longer in Wales than other parts of the UK. So it's an abundance of caution that informs you about the Welsh approach and why Wales is the first to go back into a full lockdown. Now, while the Welsh Labour government can choose its own measures, it can't fund this firebreak alone. And there is this evening still some tension between the Welsh Labour government and the Treasury. Now, the fortnight covers 2 months and 2 different job support schemes, the old furlough and the new one in November. We understand the Welsh Government wanted the Treasury to fast forward the new one to make it easier for businesses, but the rules will stay in place. And that, according to the Welsh Labour Government, does create room for confusion and maybe a crack for some companies to fall down. It's pledging £300 million of its own money to help support businesses. But many here are very worried, not just about the next 2 weeks, but for the next few months, and the fear that this may be the first of many mini lockdowns to come.
Hywel, many thanks again. Hywel Griffith there for us at the Senedd in Cardiff Bay.